disappointing subscriber growth.
Track it. What can we learn from Pokemon Go?
The news.
The UFC being sold for around $4 billion.
The moves.
Is there room for you to apply your technology
On the front lines.
Hackers also targeting the event and state delegates.
Squawk Alley. Weekdays at 1700 CET.
World Economic Forum, our all-star lineup continuing this hour. Up next, Glenn Hutchins.
Earnings Central. Financial giants Goldman Sachs and Citigroup roll out quarterly results. The numbers and the market reaction straight ahead.
Plus, the New World Order. Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist Tom Friedman joins us with his take on geopolitics as President-elect Trump takes office. The final hour of Squawk Box begins right now.
Good morning and welcome back to Squawk Box here on CNBC, live from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, on Inauguration Week. Yep, here we are. I'm Joe Kernan. That's okay. I'm Joe Kernan. We're glad to be here. I'm Joe Kernan, along with Becky Quick. And
Becky has
that looks like a little hobbit sword or something.
Yeah, I broke it. I had a really nice long one.
Andrew Ross Sorkin is here. Becky Quick is here.
I'm worried.
And like the futures, we've moved into positive temperature territory. I think we're at like 4 degrees now, which is, yeah.
A nice
either 4 degrees or these little heaters and maybe help. I don't know.
But it's crystal clear, and
beautiful.
There is a, I can see how people that live here would say, it's, you get used to it and it's pretty nice. It's invigorating.
It is.
but cold early in the morning. The dollar, I'll take a quick look after what was a tumultuous session yesterday and some comments from the president-elect. I'm going to take a quick look. You can see that the yen all the way now at 132. Wow, there's Citigroup. We're going all over the place. Someone's finger got stuck on the board button or something, Andrew. The markets look like, I think the Dow is up. What did it say, 25? Did you notice?
I
went back by quickly. Why don't you tell us about Citigroup as long as we're looking at it?
I will give you a little bit of an earnings alert. Citigroup just out with its quarterly numbers. Citi reported profits of $1.14 per share for the fourth quarter. That came in 2 cents above estimates. Revenue coming in slightly below, though, the forecast that had been expected, and that's after we heard the Goldman Sachs earnings earlier, and of course we will be talking to Lloyd Blankfein a little bit later
In fact, we will. Let's tell you about some of those Goldman Sachs numbers. As Andrew mentioned, Goldman Sachs posting better than expected earnings and revenue. The firm says that after a challenging first half, the operating environment improved during the remainder of 2016. Of course, we're going to be hearing a lot more about what they're seeing in real time when we speak with Lloyd Blankfein a little bit later this morning. Right now, though, that stock is up by about 0.5%. Target says that holiday season comparable store sales were down by 1.3%. That is softer than Target had anticipated, so it is now cutting its full year 2016 earnings and sales estimates. That stock's been hit relatively hard today. You can see right now it's down by about 4%. And on the economic front, we have a busy agenda today as well. Coming up at 8:30 Eastern Time, December CPI. Then later in the day, we'll be getting industrial production, the monthly sentiment survey from the National Association of Home Builders, and the Fed's Beige Book. Plus, this afternoon, Fed Chair Janet Yellen is scheduled to deliver remarks at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Joining us right now to talk about all things with the markets and beyond is Glenn Hutchins. He is the chairman of North Island. He's also a director at both AT&T and the NASDAQ. And Glenn, it's great to have you.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
There are so many places we could start, but why don't we start with the president-elect? Donald Trump's going to be taking office in just 2 days, and you're somebody who was a very strong supporter of Hillary Clinton throughout. What do you think as we are now heading into the Trump administration, and where are your thoughts about where things stand from a business perspective?
Well, let's look at it from the market's perspective quickly, because this is one of the issues you wanted to talk about as well. The issue, right, there's a lot of talk here at Davos about animal spirits. Joe's been a big proponent of that, we all know. My concern right now is the markets are priced in everything this incoming administration wants to do as if it's already been done. Tax reform, regulatory lessening, the infrastructure spending, and there is a lot of differences of opinion within his administration about how to do some of these things.
Sure.
There's a lot of complexity associated with getting it done. There's a lot of time lag in actually getting things done in Washington. He starts off with a very low approval rating and high expectations, which is a very unusual combination. And those animal spirits can turn pretty quickly if they're not satisfied quickly. So my concern is the markets might be overextended right now based on that kind of sentiment.
We spoke with Ray Dalio about an hour ago, and he said that where the markets have come to this point, he thinks it's because of these expectations being built in. He said himself that he knows what he doesn't know whether there will be additional gains. But you make it sound a little more dire. You think that... I
don't think it's dire. Look, Joe and I have talked about this in the past. I think that these things go in cycles. It's now time for the theory of lower regulation, lower taxes. They release these animal spirits to see if it can work.
And Ray, I should point out, was pretty enthusiastic about that part of it.
Yeah, exactly. And I hope it does. There's a lot of it a lot of inside that philosophy that I subscribe to. I'm just concerned that the markets are overreacting to what can be accomplished in what time frame.
Glenn will do if this works out, you'll do very well, as you said. And then we've talked at length about this, obviously. And then your caveat is, as some of the people that are benefiting from these things are doing well, it probably is a good idea to remember people that are unaffected by, when business does well and when assets do well. And you don't want to take your eye off people that won't do as well while all these positive animal spirit, and we agree on that.
So the Africans have a saying that when the elephants fight, only the grass gets hurt. And the one example of that facing us right now is what to do about the Affordable Care Act.
And Medicare,
one of the accomplishments of the Obama administration has been to cover 20 million plus people who weren't covered by health care. There have been our health care system is very complicated, where there might be a better solution to it. If we can find a way to a better solution to it, I'm very, very supportive of that. But if that involves taking health care away from all those people who are not advantaged by all the benefits that we're getting from the markets right now, that would be very
Donald Trump says he's in favor of repeal and replace, and that there is going to be coverage for all Americans.
So if you have coverage for all Americans and you cover pre-existing conditions and you allow kids to be on their parents' health care until they're 26 years old, I'm not sure how you take a lot of costs out of that system.
Right. So what should we be doing? I mean, obviously, it's not a perfect system. Toby Cosgrove was here this morning, too, and he said when you have a 3,000-page bill, it's not going to be perfect. You got to go through and change things.
Sure. Look, I think it's something that if you take your time to get it right, if you cooperate. Remember, most of these major pieces of reform legislation over the course of time have had teens, if not hundreds, of modifications and improvements, as you learned about. The Obamacare It was never once addressed by Congress.
In Washington,
And
you
so
don't have the two sides working
that's the
together.
issue.
You're not going to have
That's
a
gonna be the
thoughtful
question.
sitting down of doing something like that.
But that's just one example. Of the another one is what happens with taxes. In other words, if you cut taxes for the wealthy and don't spread that across the economy in some constructive way, then you've tilted the economic system toward people who've already benefited enormously by this massive run-up in the market since 2009. So again, I think the philosophy of trying to stimulate the economy with a more of a Republican, conservative kind of point of view, cyclically it's time to maybe go back to some of that. That's just fine. But being careful about its externalities is the important piece.
What does Glenn Hutchins, the investor, do right now?
Well, these times have historically been very good times to kind of make money because it's very favorable for the markets, and lower regulatory barriers mean companies can oftentimes do very well.
Does that mean that you're betting that all these things are going to happen, or you just gave us all these caveats about why?
But so there are two kind of things I'm thinking about. One is there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here in the technology space, and I'm very interested in, particularly the whole, apropos your prior speaker, the Bitcoin protocol.
Yes, Dan
for
Schulman of
payments,
PayPal.
which we can talk about kind of a little later on. But the other thing you got to worry about is that historically these sort of excesses also lead to market and economic problems. Right, and so you have to learn to protect yourself against that. The last two periods of this sort of the application of this kind of philosophy has led to very serious problems in both the economy and the stock markets.
Wait, you're looking back to the 1980s?
Yeah, talking about the 1989, 90, and 2008. 9.
Yeah.
And so as you're investing in that time period, you have to keep track of the imbalances that were building up, so you have to be sure you get out or be hedged in the right kind of way.
Right.
That makes sense. You layer on top of that right now the problem that this has so far been one of the longest economic recoveries in history. 4 more years of it, 48 more months of it would make it the longest in modern economic history. We haven't reversed laws of economic gravity, so at some point I think a betting person would be wise to think about a cycle, business cycle here too.
But the other thing is, Glenn, and people say it again and again, that they don't die, recoveries don't die of old age, and that I don't know if night follows day in terms of just where all of a sudden the clock runs out. If you haven't, through some type of flawed policies, or through, we print too much money or whatever has caused recessions in the past, I don't know if the business cycle is inevitable.
See what happens. I mean,
like night follows day.
There are two kind of things one worries about right now, Joe. One is right now you've got asset markets that are reasonably extended. If you look at historical prices of equities and commercial real estate and emerging market debt and all sorts of things that are very interest rate sensitive, you've got pretty extended prices in a time period in which we're likely to see rising interest rates. And if you cut taxes and do lots of spending and have a large funding need, that's going to put more pressure on interest rates. And so the interest rate effect could be very profound. Right, that's one. The second is there's a lot of international issues. Our relations with China, our relations with Russia, potential events in the Middle East that can interact with economic events to create these sort of questions. So, and the one thing you have right now, people on both right and left agree, is a lot of unpredictability. And that obviously usually creates some sort of conservatism in markets, but you go to unpredictability combined with this huge rally. That just causes an investor to kind of be cautious, not to be negative, but to be careful.
Bitcoin, very quickly, we're almost out of time, but they're rolling the music on us now.
Okay.
You have been somebody who has laid out a great explanation for Bitcoin and convinced a lot of people as a result.
Well, the Davos has now discovered the blockchain. Yeah. Which, since the Davos consensus is almost always wrong, concerns me. But I think that what people are missing is what I call the Bitcoin protocol, which, like the SMTP, Simple Mail Protocol, and the Voice over Internet Protocol, is a way in which we can move value around the world at the speed of light with no cost. And the blockchain is just the way for accounting for it. I think people are missing that part of it.
I think Dan Schulman said something like that
He's
too.
very smart about that.
Great. Thank you. Great to see you, sir.
Nice to be here.
Thank you, Glenn.
All right, coming up. We're going to talk media with Liberty Global CEO Mike Fries. Then the CEO of Chobani is here. We're going to talk yogurt and the consumer. And then later, Pulitzer Prize.
Welcome back to Squawk Box this morning. We're talking media. Lots to talk about here this morning with Mike Fries. He's the president and CEO of Liberty Global. Lots to talk to you about. We were just talking to the commercial break about Brexit and its implications. We've talked to a lot of other CEOs about Trump.
Right.
I don't think that's necessarily going to have a huge implication on your business, but Brexit will.
It should. Well, I mean, we have a big business in the UK, about £5 billion of revenue and thousands of employees, and we're all anxiously awaiting the process and how it'll unfold. The comments yesterday, I thought, were well received.
From Theresa May.
That's right. I mean, you know, clarity and confidence are her focus, and that's good. Let's see if it happens. My concern is that consumers start to, you know, bear the brunt of this a little bit. If people stop investing, if industry slows down, then there's a trickle-down effect on consumers. We haven't seen it yet.
Right.
But that's your concern as an operator? Just
I think so. Yeah, I mean,
create recessionary environments that
we're investing £3 billion right now as we speak, extending networks, building out, you know, fiber-based networks throughout the UK. We're not going to stop. But if other companies who are investing billions of pounds say, well, maybe I'll invest $2 billion instead of $3 billion, there's a trickle-down effect of that. So hopefully, you know, she can help create and continue to create clarity and confidence among the business community.
John Malone recently made a comment that had people speculating about a possible takeover of T-Mobile.
Right.
Can you give us a little bit of color?
Don't ask me to comment on what John says.
Well, he's the guy. This is the news.
That's the U.S. business, and I think he's just speculating about something that we believe in, which is fixed mobile convergence. So if you look at our business in Europe, throughout Europe, we will be, I think ultimately there will be 2 fixed mobile players in every country. We want to be one of them, which means we have a broadband fiber-based network, fixed, and a mobile network. And we've got mobile in 9 countries. So the U.S. will ultimately go that direction.
Right.
I think cable companies there will have to find mobility in their future, and that's a good thing.
But do you believe that broadly every cable company is effectively going to have a mobile piece to it, or can it be done over as a Wi-Fi?
Every company that has scale. So a small regional operator in the U.S., no. But we have scale in our European market. So for us, we need a mobile solution. We want seamless connectivity for our customers. That connectivity layer is where it's at.
Right.
You know, functionality and content for sure, but getting that connectivity layer right.
So when you
really
look at this Time Warner AT&T merger, does that make sense to you in the context of what you're just talking about now?
It does, because I think AT&T has national scale, national reach. They have a DirecTV product now where video, they can stream video across their phones. And the Time Warner piece adds, you know, premium content. So I think it's a smart strategy. And ultimately, when you have the connectivity layer and the functionality, I think it's a matter of time before vertical integration starts becoming more the norm.
You lived through, though, the regulatory hurdles that take place in Europe.
Correct.
Do you have any sense, just from talking and living in the world that you do, of how you think the U.S. will ultimately look at that transaction?
I think it'll get done.
You do?
I do. And I think it should get done. I'm not an expert, and I'm not as close to it as maybe others, but I think it'll get done.
Mike,
good afternoon. We are leaving our U.S. programming to bring you back to our coverage of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Bank of Japan Governor Haruhiko Kuroda has told CNBC he believes that President-elect Donald Trump's policies will improve growth, but warns that his protectionist views are a concern. Well, let's get out to Jeff, who is live from Davos and has been speaking with the central bank's Governor Haruhiko Kuroda in the last few minutes. Jeff, what were the big takeaways?
Yeah, Nancy, I have to say, I mean, I've done many interviews with Mr. Kuroda over the years, and some of them have been difficult as the Japanese economy has been struggling to find fourth gear, and some of them have been easier when there has been an improvement in
Welcome back to Squawk Box. Futures right now indicated up about 30 points on the Dow, up 4 or so on the S&P. NASDAQ indicated up 9 1/4 points so far, Andrew.
Okay. We've got a lot to talk about this morning. We are talking about global politics, of course, but we're also talking about yogurt right now. One of my favorite yogurts. The Chobani brand is a dominant force at the grocery store, but recently the company has also come under fire for hiring refugees at 2 of its U.S. factories. Joining us right now, the founder and CEO of Chobani, Hamdi Ulika. He has set up a personal refugee advocacy foundation. Employs refugees at Chobani facilities. He also has a new op-ed out today on LinkedIn, which I think is actually the topic I want to. You did and have gotten a lot of attention for is you gave out a lot of shares in your company to the workers.
Yep.
And you made millionaires out of people who never expected to be millionaires.
Yep.
He really encouraged and tried to advocate other businesses to think about how to share the pie. What kind of reaction have you gotten to that idea here?
This is why we are here to Davos, is talk about that, is what's in everybody's mind, not in America but around the globe, is this gap is widening between rich and poor. This income inequality is widening and nobody has an answer for it. I think we have an answer, which is the CEOs and businesses, is tomorrow they can fix this by doing stuff like this. What I did is from my own personal experience. I come from a small town in the eastern part of Turkey, growing up hating CEOs, businesses, because they were like somewhere else, as if they came from another universe or something, and we farmers didn't have much. When I started Chobani, I started in the same environment in upstate New York, in a broken factory with 5 factory workers in closed factory and a disrupt community. As business grew, these people worked as hard as I did. We all did. The community did. And when something created, I've always wanted to give more than anybody else when it comes to wages or 401ks or the insurances and everything else. It's just not enough. You make the calculation, and in ordinary factory workers, even with the higher wages and everything else or benefits, there's no way they can have a healthy family environment, that the kids eat better, go to schools, or they have vacation, or they can secure their future. So what's your answer? And I found out is the best answer is the people who worked in the company so hard to make this successful. Not only they get their salaries and benefits, but they also secure their future with the company they work for.
You were able to do that pre-IPO. The complicating question is, how do shareholders, if you're currently a public company today, how do you go about doing that without having shareholders say you're giving away the store?
Yeah, but
you're increasing your costs in a way that are uncompetitive.
They're doing it for their executives. They're doing it in the high level. If it's high level word is true word, they're doing it. It just doesn't go everybody else. My question is why? Why not? I mean, we all do participate in this whole thing. And shares might be one option, and there could be other options, profit sharings or whatever you may call it. But I do believe is the only model hasn't been tried is this one, which is employees, associates, or members, or whoever they work in the company or have a stake at the company.
Right. But you don't think that it creates a competitive issue?
No, I think it created a competitive issue in a positive way. So now you have 2,000 partners. They all work.
But I'm assuming that some of your senior people have to get paid less at your company because more of the money is going to people farther down the chain.
Yeah.
The question is, do those senior people say, it's a competitive market, Hamdi, I'm going to work at
no play.
Danone or whatever it is.
Well, how are they doing? Not going to the back. No, you can still make it work. This pool that we the 10% pool, and it can grow. And of course, I am in an adventure place because I'm a founder and I'm the vast majority owner, and I can do whatever I want to do. It's easy for this. But this to become a norm, we have to talk about it. This needs to become a norm. Yes, you can hire executives and you can give them the benefits and all the long-term initiatives, incentives. But at the same time, if you talk to them, they all love the idea that somebody works in the factory on the line, who contributes as much as they do, is going to secure their future. I really do not believe that there's going to be any challenge in there.
You know, I noticed that you guys really kicked off the trend for Greek yogurt, and everybody is now trying to copy it. The major brands who never had these things before have it now. How much has that changed the competitive landscape for you? How much tougher is it?
Yeah, I mean, the early days we were very fast, and we focused on making more and, you know, making the geography larger, because I knew at one point these large companies were going to come after. My biggest you know, advantage was I was in a factory and focused on making and focused on the product. As we know, these big companies that sometimes can be very, very slow. When they come in, of course, it changed the dynamics for us for a little bit, but we built a brand and we created a very good product out there. And if you look at the landscape in the last 2-3 years after they came into the marketplace, I mean, you know, you all know, we look at the news, Yoplait is totally lost, that part of it. And yogurt is still extremely excited. Like, we had last year one of the record year at Chobani's history, financially and growth-wise and financially. And we have so much to go. We launched product like Flip, and we launched product like Yogurt Drink. I believe drinkable is going to be really big in this country. But what you're going to see is some of the small players are going to get larger and larger.
Before we let you go, because we did mention this refugee project, but also the controversy. Can you speak to that?
Sure. You know, look, I'm from Turkey. I know this feeling really well. And when I settled in upstate New York, I didn't realize that there were refugees coming from 19 different countries to Utica. And same thing in Twin Falls in Idaho when I built the plant. So when we started hiring, these people did not have a place to go. They didn't have a place to work. These are legally came to this country and trying to build a life after they went through this horrible journey. And within that factory, the community and these people from all over the world created family. And we made yogurt and we built life. And this has been happening for the last 5 years. I think when we are facing this greatest humanitarian tragedy, 65 million people without home and going through this horrible journey, when they settle in somewhere, the minute they get a job, that's the minute they stop being a refugee. That's the minute they start contributing to the community, contributing to the company, and contributing to society. We have amazing stories in our plants that people work. And I am so proud that last year at Davos, we launched businesses in our alliance at 10th. It was about 10 companies. Today we have 70 amazing companies are working around refugees, especially on the integration.
Okay. Hamdi, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good luck. Appreciate it. Yeah. We're going to be eating some Chobani yogurt as we do every day. Coming up, the world according to Tom Friedman. We're going to have Tom join us in just a moment when Squawk returns from Davos.
Let us now get down to the New York Stock Exchange where Jim Cramer joins us now. Jim, and they're, we're over here, but back in the States, there are some pretty important numbers coming out from some of these companies that have done very well since the 8th, November 8th.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard to figure out what to do with Goldman Sachs and Citi. They're up huge. The numbers are fine. I mean, Citi's going to earn, say, 5.10. You want to sell it at 58, be my guess. Goldman is a terrific number. The tangible book value is up. But again, that stock has moved up. The window for selling is going to open. All I can tell you is that the stocks go up when interest rates go up, and interest rates are up today. So they are in control because it's algorithmic right now. So you'll see Goldman was down 3, now it's up $1. But that's because of interest rates. This is a very hard market to trade. You ought to have conviction. If you don't have conviction, get out, because man, these stocks are all over the place.
So what if I had one thing to ask Lloyd for you? What do you want me to ask him?
What do we do with stocks like Target, because their bricks and mortar are just so dead? I mean, Target's worst enemy right now is the online. I mean, the online was superb. What do you do? What do you do when your online just doesn't make you nearly as much money as your bricks and mortar? That's the situation facing retailers this particular quarter. It's happening way too fast. They're not ready.
Okay, Jim. Thank you. We'll see you.
Yep.
Okay.
U.S. relations with Russia, Israel, and Iran are likely to look very different after President-elect Trump takes office just the end of this week. Let's bring in Tom Friedman, New York Times foreign affairs columnist, talk a lot about what he's been seeing and anticipating. And Tom, it's great to see you.
Great to be here.
That's one of the things that people are talking about everywhere here in Davos, is how the world changes and the U.S.'s relationship with so many different countries will be affected. What do you think happens? The one thing everybody agrees on is it's changed. Nobody exactly knows how.
Yeah, let's take the Russia relationship. Personally, I'm all for better relations with Russia. There's a lot of things we can sure do together. Where President-elect Trump has talked about working with them is in Syria to fight ISIS. But that's sort of the first paragraph. But here's the second. The second paragraph for me is Russia's allies in Syria are Iran, Hezbollah, and a collection of jihadist mercenaries from Central Asia. So are they going to be our allies? That's number one. And number two, Putin's goal in Syria has not been to defeat ISIS. His goal has been to actually reinforce the leadership of Bashar Assad, who's been a bit of a genocidal, authoritarian there. So the question is, how are we going to balance all of that? How does that actually work out? Because Syria only ends well if it's on the principle of no victor, no vanquish, that there's a power-sharing agreement. Now, if Russia's ready to be a partner for that, that could work out really well, and to use its leverage with Assad. If it's to use us to crush his allies, that will end really badly. That's one question. Another question is China, the big question on everyone's mind here. So, what's the best way, I think, to counterbalance China and Asia? It would be to sign TPP. To basically consolidate an alliance of like-minded allies around free trade principles, because this is important, I think, for security as it is for trade. But President Trump is either going to renegotiate or so far has been abjuring TPP. So it's just not clear to me where the second paragraph is.
The whole idea, Trump has said that he's in favor of free trade, but he doesn't think the trade we have right now is set up fairly or evenly, and that America has gotten the wrong end of the stick. I've heard that repeated by Democrats and Republicans here this week. That in looking at it, when they really dig into it, they don't think we're getting a fair deal either.
Yeah, he said things which resonate with me, frankly, on Japan. Anyone knows Japan for years used non-tariff barriers to keep us out. How many Oldsmobiles have you ever seen on the streets of Tokyo? There is a reason for that. So, I think, using greater leverage, I think, to open up some of these markets, I think could make a lot of sense. It's all about how you do it, and I'm just watching. I'm not predicting anything. I'm in that regard.
Did you sneak up the Trump Tower yet? Have you been there?
I was there, Joe, when he came to the Times. And
for the Times, you haven't been up the elevator.
I have not been up the elevator.
I don't want to say. You want to tell us? Is it already planned? I don't want to be surprised. I don't want to be surprised. There's Friedman.
It hasn't happened. As you know,
scheduled?
I talk to everybody, and
is it scheduled?
Right, left, or center. So we'll see what happens.
Tom, we were at a dinner last night, and one of the conversations that came up was, is the world still flat? In that we now almost feel like, in a world that felt like it was getting smaller because of globalization, that maybe that flatness is having some bumps in it.
So I would disagree. I think actually one of the reasons this election happened is because it's flatter than ever, but it's flatter in the way that I actually wrote about flat, which was not borderless. I never believed in that. I think that globalization that's driving us forward today is not your grandfather's globalization. That was containers on ships. That is declining. It's digital globalization. Everything that's now being digitized and globalized, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or MOOCs or PayPal. I was just meeting with Dan Schulman this morning from PayPal. You know, and PayPal did $2 billion last year in small loans in basically the developing world to its customers, and they do them without even FICO scores because they've got big data. They know Andrew Sorkin's a good risk. So actually, that global, it's all how you measure it. And I think the world's flatter than ever, which is one of the things that's stressing, I think, a lot of workers in the developed world.
Because the technology is displacing?
Well, I think it's two things going on. But, you know, one is technology is displacing a lot more jobs, and it's creating a world, and this is what I meant by flat, where more people in more places can compete, connect, and collaborate than ever before. I think on balance that's a good thing, but obviously it poses, you know, challenges for us. So I think we have a lot to think through now, but I think the biggest thing roiling people is, you know, one of the things I say in my new book is that when I grew up in Minnesota, the 50s, 60s, and 70s, as a congressman in Minnesota, who said, you know, grow up in Minnesota then, you actually needed a plan to fail. That as America stood astride the world with so much economic and industrial dominance that you needed a plan to fail. Now you need a plan to succeed, and you have to update that plan every 6 months. And I think it's true if you're an individual, and I think it's true if you're a country. And I think that's one of the things really stressing a lot of people.
You know, we just spoke with Jim Cramer, and he was talking about Target's numbers that were out today. Their comp store sales were down, weaker than expected for Christmas. And you've written recently about how, look, the world's at a tipping point right now, and cyberspace is taking over for everything.
I think what happened this year, we saw it in the retail sales. We saw it also in politics, that our lives moved to cyberspace. Our lives have moved to a realm where we're all connected, but nobody's in charge. And there's no 1-800 stop hooting from hacking me to call. There's no judge. There's no court. And I think we haven't really figured out how to manage in a world. I have a chapter in my book called "Is God in Cyberspace?" for that reason. You know, that who is going to govern things there? And I think this is going to be a huge governing challenge going forward.
That's great. Tom, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Always a pleasure.
Great to close the show here.
Yeah, I hope to see you back in the States sometime soon with us.
Is there a golf course down
there?
Do I see it? It's way down. It's right.
You get a lot of distance because I think it's frozen. Half these things are. It doesn't go into the snow. You need orange balls, though.
Exactly. Thanks, you guys.
Don't try blue balls over here. Anyway, still to come, we're going to talk to J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon and Goldman Sachs Chief Lloyd Blankfein. Two interviews you won't want to miss starting at 10:30 Eastern Time. Squawk Box will be right back.
VT
Jamie Dimon, JP Morgan CEO, speaking to our U.S. colleagues, and we've been speaking to other leaders from across the financial world about the health of the banking sector. Take a listen.
So I think there's two things. I think so coming back to regulation, the uncertainty premium was placed on bank stocks, so you didn't know what you're going to get back in dividends and buybacks. And I think that's going to, the 2017, the key story will be that regulation burdens ease, and therefore people can look back and say it's a 1 times book value stock at least, if not higher. Now, US banks are trading about 1.4 times book now. There's, I think, further to go, but obviously the rate rises are really critical to what's happening.
We don't expect interest margins per se to further improve. Actually, I think all of the banks still have some time to go with finding compensating measures in order to offset some of the pressure on margins given the QE policy of the ECB.
The situation of our banks is much better than it was only 5-6 years ago. We do not have anymore any cajas, any saving banks. The restructuring of the banking industry in Spain, I think that it has been an example for others.
Let's give you a check on some European banking shares on the move in this late afternoon session. Credit Suisse shares are trading sharply lower after a U.S. appeals court revived a lawsuit related to the sale of mortgage-backed securities. The original case was brought against 5 banks for MBS sales in the lead-up to the global financial crisis in 2008. Other banks involved included RBS and Deutsche Bank. Well, speaking of, Deutsche Bank has drastically cut 2016 compensation, announcing it will not pay senior managers any bonuses for last year. The lender's board told staff in a memo that tough measures were unavoidable due to its substantial legal bill. This comes after Deutsche finalized a $7.2 billion settlement with the DOJ over the sale of mortgage-backed securities leading up to the financial crisis. Well, we spoke to European Commission Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis and asked him about that settlement.
Indeed, it provides some clarity, and it allows also Deutsche Bank to plan their activities accordingly.
And another big interview you will not want to miss today. Jeff will be speaking to the CEO of Deutsche Bank himself. That is John Cryan, exclusively coming up later this evening. You can tune in from 1800 CET for that conversation. Plus, still to come, we will be speaking to German Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen. Stay with us. We'll have much more after this break.
Six Capital essentially believes that putting the crowd together can create wonderful things in this new world with financial technology. We are a specialist in the area of currency trading. We train an army of traders, and they all trade on demo or dummy accounts. The trades that they generated goes into a big data analytics center called RiceBall. RiceBall will select 5 to 20% of the high probability winning trades and copied it into the real-life markets. Six Capital is not a speculative company. We have hedge funds, high net worth individuals, and a host of customers.
Ein wachsendes Anspruchsdenken der Bürger. Gauks Amtszeit endet am 18. März.
They copy the trades that has gone live, and we earn a fee from those trades. How to buy and exit within 90 seconds, such that it is a profitable trade.
Wegen der Mittäterschaft am 10. Morgen angeklagt. Bundesanwaltschaft ermittelt bei DİTİB. Es bestehe der Verdacht der geheimdienstlichen Tätigkeit. DİTİB ist der größte deutsche Islambund. Er hatte bereits vergangene Woche Bespitzelungen für den türkischen Staat eingeräumt. Deutsche Bahn erzielt 2016 Überschuss. Vor Zinsen und Steuern verdiente das Unternehmen 1,8 Milliarden Euro. Im Fernverkehr stieg der Anteil pünktlicher Züge nach Konzernangaben auf 78,9%. Das Wetter. Morgen im Norden gebietsweise Schnee oder gefrierender Regen.
Our primary aim is to be able to harness the crowd, produce impact.
-7 bis +.
digital disruption. CNBC.com is your Earning Central destination. Make the most of the numbers before you make your move. Earning Central on CNBC.com.
Welcome back. We are still live from Davos, where Steve is at the Congress Center conducting a panel on the transition to clean energy. Let's listen in
Davos to talk about their progress today and what they still need to do going forward as well. Christiana Figueres, I don't know where to start really. This is the lady who single-handedly, with the help of some very English tea bags, got everyone. PG Tips was the secret.
Single-handedly with millions of people, right?
You dragged the cats, the herd of cats, to get COP21 done, and it was a privilege to speak with you in December 2015 and get that going. Of course, we've spoken since, and you've since moved on to your latest mission, which is Mission 2020, which you're going to tell us a little bit more about in a few moments' time as well. Great to see Oleg as well. Oleg Deripaska, the president of UC Rusal, now for an aluminium company to make such great strides in energy conservation and getting down emissions, it's no mean feat. And Oleg's already made some very interesting comments previously about what renewables need to survive in the 21st century. Patrick Pouyanné, one of my favourite CEOs of an IOC. We've spent a lot of time chatting over the years, and I have a lot of respect for Patrick, not least because he argues a lot, and I like that. I like his contention as well, and we've already had 1 or 2 panels this year, so I'm looking forward to more of the same from Patrick today. And Ignacio Sanchez-Galan as well, who, of course, is the chairman and CEO of Iberdrola, who he tells me, and it says on their website, is the greenest utility in Europe and #1 for renewables in the United States. So maybe we'll challenge that a little bit as well on that premise. I'm going to start off with Christiana, if I may, and just say, what's the progress looking like in the energy industry? We have a whole host of people representing different parties here as well. You called for a lot of progress in late 2015. You called for dramatic action. Is the energy industry doing anywhere near enough to get to the target goals?
You know, in Germany, where I used to live, there is a German word that doesn't exist in any other language, but I wish it would, because we Latin Americans love to say both yes and no to every single question. And so in German, there is a word that is Jein, which is both yes and no. And so let me start with the yes. And there I would really like to recognize the leadership around this circle. Really quite amazing leadership, each from their different vantage point, to really support the direction that was set by governments and now take that to the real economy and begin to get serious traction on decarbonizing the economy, on decarbonizing the global electric system in particular. And every single one of the gentlemen here are contributing to that really very seriously. So it is no longer a question of, are we moving in the right direction? The direction is irreversible. It is incontrovertible. It is not going to change. The question for me, because, you know, I'm eternally provocative, the question for me is not the direction, but the speed and the scale, which is your second question of how much more do we have to do. And that is, you know, the piece that I am still struggling with, and that I would very much appreciate having some comments on today, because the fact is that we need to step up both speed and scale. So let's just get a sense of that. We need to be, please don't fall out of your chairs, we need to be at the maximum of global emissions of greenhouse gases by 2020. That is, according to Costa Rican calendar, 4 years from now. That sounds practically impossible. And in particular, if you begin to figure out what does that mean, that means, just for us, you know, to begin to wrap our hands around it, it means practically that 50% of the electricity being generated around the world would have to be renewable or non-emitting. It means that the last car with an internal combustion engine would have to be put on the road by 2035 and not a day after, because we need to be at zero emission via transportation by 2050. And that is a huge step from where we are now. So I would challenge the wonderful gentlemen around the circle, not around the direction, which I think is fantastic, and each of them have shown incredible leadership, but from where we are to where we need to get to in 4 years. How are we going to do that? It is necessary, we know that from science. It is advisable because of all of the many benefits that we're going to get. The question that we have to engage is, how are we going to make it achievable?
Christiana, you did say you're going to be provocative, didn't you?
Just a little bit.
Who's the laggards? If you had to say a part of the industry, you can name a country if you like, you can name a company if you like, you don't have to, but where, if you're being vague about it or being very provocative, are the areas where you want to give them the biggest prod?
I think that one thing that is pretty clear to most people is that there is no space for any new coal. There is simply no space for any new coal. And I know that that is a very difficult reality for many countries to deal with. I have such respect for China, who just yesterday canceled 101, I think, coal plants because of health reasons. But there's so many other reasons, right, to really, so we need, and I think that's, that is a tough nut to crack, in particular for developing countries, because it's A, no new coal, and it is B, a premature, if you will, and I put that in quotation marks, but in any event, an early retirement of existing coal. It also means for India, who's not sitting around the table, it also means how do we support India to move beyond coal, and certainly not to invest in subcritical coal technology, which is anyway the worst technology. How do we support that? China's taken a huge, huge leap on coal, but there are many other developing countries, India being one of the most, poster child. How do we support them in that?
Which was part of the question in the talks in the first place. Well, I think that goes very nicely to Nur Bekri as well. We can talk specifically about coal in a few moments' time, but tell me how you feel about the transition that China is acting at the moment. Number one, I think, for wind, number one for photovoltaic, for solar more generally as well, but also number one for coal as well. So perhaps you'd like to address the speed of the transition, sir.
非常高兴参加这个达沃斯年会的能源清洁转型这个公开会，和大家呀一起共享中国在能源清洁转型方面的前景。
And you've been listening in to Steve's Clean Energy panel live from Davos, and we will be continuing our coverage from the event. After the break, we will be speaking to German Defense Minister Ursula von der Leyen. Stay with us. You don't want to miss that one.
Guten Tag, hier ist die Tagesschau in 100 Sekunden. Cem Özdemir ist nach Mitgliederbefragung zweiter Spitzenkandidat der Grünen für die Bundestagswahl. Katrin Göring-Eckardt hatte als einzige Bewerberin ihre Kandidatur sicher. Die Bundestagswahl findet wahrscheinlich am 24. September statt. Bilanzrede von Gauck. Der Bundespräsident rief in Berlin eindringlich zur Verteidigung der Demokratie auf. Zudem kritisierte er ein wachsendes Anspruchsdenken der Bürger. Gaucks Amtszeit endet am 18. März. Psychiatrischer Gutachter hält Zschäpe für voll schuldfähig. Im NSU-Prozess plädierte der Sachverständige auch für eine Sicherungsverwahrung von Zschäpe. Sie ist unter anderem wegen der Mittäterschaft an 10 Morden angeklagt. Bundesanwaltschaft ermittelt bei DİTİB. Es bestehe der Verdacht der geheimdienstlichen Tätigkeit. DİTİB ist der größte deutsche Islamverband. Er hatte bereits vergangene Woche Bespitzelungen für den türkischen Staat eingeräumt. Deutsche Bahn erzielt 2016 Überschuss. Vor Zinsen und Steuern verdiente das Unternehmen 1,8 Milliarden Euro. Im Fernverkehr stieg der Anteil pünktlicher Züge nach Konzernangaben auf 78,9%. Das Wetter. Morgen im Norden gebietsweise Schnee oder gefrierender Regen mit Glättegefahr. Im Süden und in der Mitte oft sonnig, regional Nebelfelder. -7 bis +7 Grad. Guten Tag, hier ist die Tagesschau in 100 Sekunden. Cem Özdemir ist nach Mitgliederbefragung zweiter Spitzenkandidat der Grünen für die Bundestagswahl. Katrin Göring-Eckardt hatte als einzige Bewerberin ihre Kandidatur sicher. Die Bundestagswahl findet wahrscheinlich am 24. September statt.
Important deals are broken.
And the S&P at an all-time high today.
And news is made.
We have breaking news now in Silicon Valley with some breaking news.
Power.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Live at Davos. I'm Nancy Hungerford. Germany wants to reach out to the Trump administration in order to maintain ties. That, according to Chancellor Merkel's foreign policy advisor. Speaking to CDU lawmakers, Christoph Heusge said that Germany would gradually increase military spending towards the NATO goal of 2% of GDP. Well, let's get back out to Julia Chatterley, who joins us with a special guest. Hi, Julia.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you for coming back to me. I'm joined by Ursula von der Leyen. She's Germany's defence minister. Minister, thank you so much for joining us. We were just mentioning there the prospect of the German government reaching out to the new US administration. That's critical, isn't it, at this point?
It is necessary, and we're looking forward to work together with the new administration. For example, I've been watching the hearing for Jim Mattis, my colleague. As defense minister, it was very reassuring. So I'm very curious to meet him, and I would very much like to discuss with him how we're going to move forward in our alliance.
You mean that he toned down some of the rhetoric that we've heard from Donald Trump, the campaigner? Do you believe that actually Donald Trump, the president, might be more moderate? Is that the hope here?
Well, I think we can build on a strong friendship between Europe, Germany and the United States within the transatlantic alliance, because this is not an alliance only about military means, it's an alliance about values we share, fighting for democracy, fighting for freedom, fighting for the rule of law, and this is what it carries us on.
He's been directly critical of Germany, though. He accused Angela Merkel of making a terrible mistake over the refugee policy. Does your government believe it was a terrible mistake?
Well, if you look at the bare numbers, the number of refugees has been down last year in 2016, lower than 1/3 than we had in 2015. And the country managed it well, because if you look at the economic numbers, for example, they're extremely stable. We have a very robust economy. We have the lowest unemployment since reunification. Never ever in the German history had more people a job, so youth unemployment is barely zero. All these figures are good figures, but of course it
Hier ist das erste deutsche Fernsehen mit der Tagesschau. Heute im Studio Susanne Holst.
Guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren, willkommen zur Tagesschau. Mann, Frau, Fundi und Realo, Spitzenämter im Doppelpakt und paritätisch zu vergeben, das hatte bei den Grünen lange Tradition. Für das Spitzenduo, das die Partei nun in den Bundestagswahlkampf führt, gilt das so nicht mehr. Denn sowohl Fraktionschefin Göring-Eckardt als auch Parteichef Özdemir gehören zum Realo-Flügel, der schon mal mit Schwarz-Grün liebäugelt. Özdemir hat sich in der Urwahl durchgesetzt mit nur 75 Stimmen Vorsprung vor Schleswig-Holsteins Umweltminister Habeck, aber deutlich gegen Fraktionschef Hofreiter.
Da stehen sie mehr erleichtert als triumphierend, die neuen Hoffnungsträger der Grünen. Cem Özdemir nur mit hauchdünnem Vorsprung gewinnt.
Hier ist das erste deutsche Fernsehen mit der Tagesschau. Heute im Studio Susanne Holst.
Guten Tag, meine Damen und Herren, willkommen zur Tagesschau. Mann, Frau, Fundi und Realo, Spitzenämter im Doppelpakt und paritätisch zu vergeben, das hatte bei den Grünen lange Tradition. Für das Spitzenduo, das die Partei nun in den Bundestagswahlkampf führt, gilt das so nicht mehr. Denn sowohl Fraktionschefin Göring-Eckardt als auch Parteichef Özdemir gehören zum Realo-Flügel, der schon mal mit Schwarz-Grün liebäugelt. Özdemir hat sich in der Urwahl durchgesetzt mit nur 75 Stimmen Vorsprung vor Schleswig-Holsteins Umweltminister Habeck, aber deutlich gegen Fraktionschef Hofreiter.
Da stehen sie mehr erleichtert als triumphierend, die neuen Hoffnungsträger der Grünen. Cem Özdemir nur mit hauchdünnem Vorsprung gewählt und Katrin Göring-Eckardt, die ohne Gegenkandidatin auf 70% Zustimmung kam.
Das ist für uns ein Aufbruch. Das ist für uns ein klares Signal. Ja, wir wollen deutlich zweistellig werden. Wir wollen wachsen.
Monatelang hatte der innerparteiliche Wahlkampf viele Kräfte gebunden. Robert Habeck gilt nun nach der denkbar knappen Niederlage als Mann der Zukunft bei den Grünen. Toni Hofreiter endete als Vertreter des linken Flügels dagegen abgeschlagen. Jetzt komme es freilich darauf an, zusammenzustehen, meint Cem Özdemir.
Wir haben insgesamt 4 Gewinne und vor allem eine Partei, die gestärkt aus dieser Urwahl hervorgegangen ist. Und ich will an dieser Stelle ausdrücklich sagen, dass ich beide, Robert Habeck und Toni Hofreiter, brauchen werde.
So ganz konnte Toni Hofreiter seine Enttäuschung am Nachmittag dann doch nicht verbergen.
Natürlich hätte ich mir gewünscht, dass ich ein etwas besseres Ergebnis erzielt habe. Aber angesichts der starken Konkurrenten finde ich mein Ergebnis ordentlich.
Als Partei der Weltoffenheit und Toleranz wollen Özdemir und Göring-Eckardt die Grünen nach der Wahl in eine Regierung führen, ausdrücklich ohne sich auf einen Koalitionspartner festzulegen.
Die Wähler können sich jetzt schon mal den 24. September merken. Dann soll die Bundestagswahl stattfinden. Diesen Termin beschloss das Kabinett auf Vorschlag von Innenminister de Maizière. Das Datum war zuvor mit den Bundestagsfraktionen und den Ländern besprochen worden. Endgültig festgelegt wird der Wahltag von Bundespräsident Gauck. In der Regel folgt das Staatsoberhaupt aber der Empfehlung der Regierung. Und den Termin für die Bundestagswahl festzulegen, das dürfte eine der letzten Amtshandlungen werden für Bundespräsident Gauck. Denn für ihn geht es auf die Zielgerade. Demnächst wird sein Nachfolger gewählt. Heute zog Gauck Bilanz. In seiner Abschiedsrede sprach er von rauen Zeiten. Gerade jetzt aber sollten die Deutschen das Vertrauen in die eigenen Kräfte und die Stärke ihrer Demokratie nicht verlieren.
Es soll sein politisches Vermächtnis sein. Bundespräsident Gauck warnt vor den Gefahren, die dem demokratischen und stabilen Deutschland drohen. Es seien große Anstrengungen notwendig, um es zu erhalten. Eine geordnete Diskussionskultur müsse Hetze und bewusste Falschmeldungen ersetzen.
Lassen wir es nicht dazu kommen, dass sich Macht wieder ohne das wahrheitsgestützte Argument durchsetzt. Verteidigen wir stattdessen die Demokratie als eine Macht, die sich dem Argument anvertraut und sich von ihm leiten lässt.
Joachim Gauck bezeichnet sich selbst als Verfassungspatriot. Er mahnt, ein schwacher Rechtsstaat verliere im Kampf gegen Gewalt und Terror seine Vertrauenswürdigkeit. Zum Schutz der Demokratie fordert er engere internationale Zusammenarbeit, auch in militärischer Hinsicht.
Denn die Aussage, meine Damen und Herren, es könne niemals eine militärische Lösung geben, sie klingt ja gut und sie ist gut. Allerdings nur, solange sich alle Seiten an diese Maxime halten. Ich unterstütze daher verstärkte europäische Verteidigungsbemühungen.
Das Wichtigste, was Gauck den nächsten Generationen mit auf den Weg geben will, ist eine Haltung. Das Vertrauen in die eigenen Kräfte und in die Demokratie.
Unsäglich, inakzeptabel, hetzerisch, so sehen viele Politiker die jüngsten Äußerungen des thüringischen AfD-Landeschefs Höcke. Der hatte gestern in einer Rede offenbar mit Blick auf das Holocaust-Mahnmal in Berlin von einem Denkmal der Schande gesprochen. SPD-Chef Gabriel sagte, ihm sei es kalt den Rücken runtergelaufen. Der Zentralrat der Juden nannte Höckes Äußerungen zutiefst empörend. Der AfD-Politiker meinte inzwischen, er fühle sich missverstanden. Voll schuldfähig lautet das Urteil des psychiatrischen Gutachters im NSU-Prozess über die Hauptangeklagte Zschäpe und er sehe bei der mutmaßlichen Rechtsterroristen ein Risiko für weitere Taten, sagte der Sachverständige vor dem Oberlandesgericht München weiter. Die Voraussetzungen für eine Sicherungsverwahrung nach der Haft seien deshalb gegeben. Dem Gutachten könnte eine entscheidende Rolle für das Strafmaß zukommen.
München, Oberlandesgericht, kurz nach 9 Uhr. Dieser Mann ist heute im NSU-Prozess die wichtigste Person. Die Einschätzungen von Professor Henning Sass könnten direkten Einfluss auf ein zukünftiges Urteil haben. In seinem psychiatrischen Gutachten bescheinigt Sass Beate Zschäpe die volle Schuldfähigkeit, einen Mangel an Empathie und antisoziale Tendenzen. Sass zeichnet das Bild einer kämpferischen, selbstbewussten Frau. Viele Opferanwälte sehen sich bestätigt.
Er hat uns ja ausführlich dargelegt, dass Frau Zschäpe jemand ist, der sehr stark eigene Verantwortlichkeiten externalisiert, also auf andere schiebt, der sehr schlecht dazu in der Lage ist, eigene Verantwortung zu erkennen und auch zu übernehmen. Und ein Mensch, der ein sehr distanziertes Verhältnis zu dem hat, was da tatsächlich geschehen ist.
Mittäterin bei den 10 Morden von Uwe Böhnhardt und Uwe Mundlos soll Beate Zschäpe laut Anklage gewesen sein. Und der Gutachter hält sie immer noch für gefährlich. Es bestehe ein hohes Risiko, dass Zschäpe in Freiheit erneut zu einer Täterin werden könnte. Anhaltspunkte für eine Verhaltensänderung seien nicht erkennbar.
Und da gehe ich davon aus, dass der Senat erkennen wird, dass sie den Hang zur Gewalt unbehandelt und derzeit auch nicht behandelbar behalten wird. Und dass sie letztendlich, wenn sie zu einer lebenslangen Freiheitsstrafe kommt, mindestens noch mal 25 Jahre drauf bekommt.
Morgen geht der Vortrag des Sachverständigen weiter. Mit dem psychiatrischen Gutachten endet zwar in der Regel die Beweisaufnahme, dennoch rechnen viele Beteiligte nicht mit einem Urteil vor dem Herbst.
Der Weihnachtsmarkt-Attentäter von Berlin ist den deutschen Behörden offenbar nur knapp entwischt. Amri wurde Informationen des Redaktionsnetzwerkes Deutschland zufolge 2 Tage nach dem Anschlag in Emmerich am Niederrhein in einem Bus gesehen. Die zeitweilige Unterkunft des Tunesiers in Emmerich war am Abend dieses Tages durchsucht worden. Heute beriet der Innenausschuss des Bundestages über Konsequenzen aus dem Anschlag. Dabei wurden weitere Schwachstellen offenbar.
Für Thomas de Maizière geht es derzeit vor allem um eine Frage. Was sind die richtigen Konsequenzen aus dem Fall Amri? Innenausschusssitzung am Vormittag. Die Grünen wollen erst einmal die Pannenserie aufarbeiten.
Der richtige Weg ist zuerst einmal wirklich lückenlos diesen Sachverhalt aufzuklären. Das ist zunächst einmal die vordringliche Pflicht.
Aktuelle Stunde im Bundestag. Der Innenminister widerspricht.
Wir haben es heute im Ausschuss diskutiert. Erst volle Aufklärung zu verlangen und dann Maßnahmen und Konsequenzen zu diskutieren, halte ich jedenfalls dann für falsch, wenn wir von diesen Maßnahmen, die jetzt erforderlich sind, jetzt überzeugt sind.
Schon jetzt würden bekannte Gefährder unter die Lupe genommen, Abschiebungen geprüft, die Risikobewertungen verbessert, verspricht der Innenminister. Allerdings, derzeit gibt es in Deutschland 3 Gefährder, deren Aufenthalt in Sicherheitsbehörden nicht bekannt ist.
Das ist ein riesiges Sicherheitsrisiko und da sind wir alle aufgefordert, die Sicherheitsbehörden, aber auch die Politik dafür zu sorgen, dass es solche Sicherheitsrisiken in Zukunft nicht mehr gibt.
Nicht nur im Innen-, auch im Rechtsausschuss wurde diskutiert, wie kann die Zusammenarbeit der Behörden verbessert werden. Auch die der unterschiedlichen Staatsanwaltschaften. Der große Aufarbeitungsprozess hat gerade erst begonnen.
Harte Maßnahmen seien unumgänglich. Das schreibt der Vorstand der Deutschen Bank heute an die Mitarbeiter und gibt bekannt, die Bonuszahlungen fürs vergangene Jahr werden gekürzt. Der Vorstand bekommt wieder gar keine, hochrangige Manager deutlich niedrigere. In der Mitteilung nennt der Vorstand als Grund auch, dass die Bank wegen dubioser Hypothekengeschäfte 6,8 Milliarden Euro Strafe an US-Behörden zahlen muss. Also Einschnitte bei den Bonuszahlungen für das vergangene Jahr. Sissi Heidmannek, wie wird denn dieser Schritt in der Frankfurter Börse eingeschätzt?
Ja, es wirkt enorm, wie stark die Bonuszahlungen da gekürzt oder gestrichen werden. Aber dagegen steht, dass die Fixgehälter, gerade der Investmentbanker im letzten Jahr, teilweise ganz ordentlich angehoben wurden. Trotzdem, es ist ein Teil der Sparmaßnahmen und ein Signal für die Aktionäre und ein schmerzhafter Schritt für immerhin ca. 25% der Mitarbeiter der Deutschen Bank. Ja, die Entwicklung, die ist auch nicht ganz neu. In den letzten Jahren ist die Bonusvergütung immer weiter zurückgegangen. Für 2017 will die Bank dann zwar wieder zum üblichen Verfahren der variablen Vergütung zurückkehren. Sie soll also wieder erfolgsabhängig werden. Aber dafür müssen natürlich auch Gewinne gemacht werden. Und das größte Problem, das bleibt in vielen Bereichen, ist noch heute keine neue, klare Strategie erkennbar, wie die Deutsche Bank wieder profitabler werden will. Ja, die Aktie daher unverändert jetzt bei 17,46 €. Der DAX dagegen im Plus mit 0,3% bei 11.578 Punkten aktuell.
Sissi Heidmannek, danke schön. Das war wohl die pure Freude und Erleichterung bei Antonio Tajani, als er hier seinem Amtsvorgänger Martin Schulz um den Hals fällt. Nach einem kleinen Abstimmungsmarathon wurde der Italiener gestern Abend zum neuen Präsidenten des Europaparlaments gewählt, erst im 4. Durchgang in einer Stichwahl. Was zeigt, dass Tajani im Parlament nicht unumstritten ist. Er erklärte, er wolle das Amt anders ausüben als Schulz und vor allem das Parlament stärken.
Es war ein erbitterter Machtkampf, doch der Wechsel an der Spitze des Europaparlaments verlief in aller Würde.
Herr Präsident, ich darf Sie bitten, Ihren Platz einzunehmen.
Der Christdemokrat Antonio Tajani aus Italien ist der Nachfolger von Martin Schulz. Ich werde ein Präsident für alle sein. Ich werde alle Abgeordneten und alle Gruppen hier respektieren. Doch trotz der versöhnlichen Töne, Tajanis Wahl hat Spuren hinterlassen. Neben Christdemokraten und Liberalen stimmten für ihn nämlich auch Abgeordnete, die Europa sehr skeptisch sehen, die Tories aus Großbritannien etwa, die die EU verlassen.
Es war ein harter Kampf, auch ein ideologisch aufgeladener Kampf. Aber Antonio Tajani ist jetzt gewählt und verdient die Unterstützung des gesamten Parlaments.
Erstmals seit vielen Jahren aber wird der Parlamentspräsident nicht von den Sozialdemokraten mitgetragen. Sie halten Tajani für zu industrienah, für jemanden, der sich nicht für soziale Fragen engagiert. Kommissionspräsident Juncker warnte heute vor einer Blockade. Wir arbeiten hier alle für Europa und niemand hat das Recht, Europa den Rücken zu kehren, nur weil er enttäuscht ist, dass das Parlament jetzt anders aufgestellt ist. Eine Aufforderung auch mit Blick auf die Aufgaben, die in den nächsten Monaten anliegen, im Europaparlament in Straßburg.
Kurz vor Ende seiner Amtszeit hat US-Präsident Obama noch einmal für eine handfeste Überraschung gesorgt. Er gewährte der Whistleblowerin Chelsea Manning einen deutlichen Strafnachlass. Sie soll nun im Mai nach rund 7 Jahren Haft freikommen. Manning war zu 35 Jahren Haft verurteilt worden, weil sie der Enthüllungsplattform WikiLeaks Hunderttausende geheime Dokumente zugespielt hatte. Obamas Entscheidung ist in Washington heftig umstritten.
Aus dem Senat kam heute heftige Kritik an Obamas überraschender Entscheidung. Die frühere Soldatin und WikiLeaks-Informantin Chelsea Manning soll schon im Mai freikommen. Senatoren beider Parteien halten die Haftverkürzung für falsch. Hunderttausende Dokumente wurden geleakt. Das hat die nationale Sicherheit gefährdet. Es hat auch unsere Geheimagenten gefährdet. Der Typ ist ein Verräter. Mich enttäuscht das. Chelsea Manning hieß zum Zeitpunkt ihrer Gerichtsverhandlung noch Bradley Manning. Als Mann war sie mit der US-Armee im Irak. In der Haft hatte sie sich einer Hormontherapie unterzogen. Manning hatte gestanden, während ihrer Zeit im Irak vertrauliche Armeedokumente an WikiLeaks gegeben zu haben. Darunter auch das Video eines Hubschrauberangriffs, bei dem mehrere Zivilisten getötet wurden. Im Prozess hatte Mannings gesagt, sie wolle eine öffentliche Debatte über die Kriege im Irak und in Afghanistan anstoßen. WikiLeaks-Gründer Julian Assange hatte vor kurzem angekündigt, sich in die USA ausliefern zu lassen, sollte Manning freikommen. Heute hieß es, er werde zunächst doch in der ecuadorianischen Botschaft in London bleiben. Assanges Ankündigung habe nichts mit Obamas Entscheidung zu tun gehabt, hieß es in Washington. Mannings Haftstrafe werde verkürzt, weil sie Reue gezeigt habe und weil das Strafmaß mit 35 Jahren unverhältnismäßig hoch gewesen sei.
In Italien hat erneut die Erde gebebt. Besonders betroffen ist die Region um Amatrice im Mittelitalien. Hier erreichten die Beben teilweise eine Stärke von über 5. Laut Ministerpräsident Gentiloni gibt es bisher keine Erkenntnisse über mögliche Opfer. Das Beben war auch in der Hauptstadt Rom zu spüren. Sicherheitshalber wurden viele Schulen geräumt. Außerdem wurde der U-Bahn-Verkehr unterbrochen. Und zum Schluss der Sendung schauen wir noch auf die Wetteraussichten. Morgen im Norden wolkenverhangen und gebietsweise Schnee oder gefrierender Regen mit Glättegefahr. Im Süden und in der Mitte oft sonnig. -7 bis +7 Grad. Und das war's für jetzt. Das war die Tagesschau um 5. Gleich geht es hier im Programm weiter mit Brisant. Und die nächste Tagesschau, die können Sie dann um 20 Uhr sehen. Ihnen noch einen guten Abend. Auf Wiedersehen.
Guten Tag.